He returned the way many soldiers do, quietly and without applause. The transport ship docked, the ramp lowered, and the group walked out in neat lines, carrying bags that held more weight in memory than in fabric. For him, the end of the mission did not feel like an ending at all. It felt like the sudden removal of noise, leaving behind a ringing silence that followed him everywhere. The mission had not been a war in the way stories described war. There were no heroic charges or dramatic last stands. It was long days of standing watch, slow negotiations, and the constant pressure of being the line between peace and disaster. His unit was sent to protect talks between humans and newly discovered species. Their job was to stay alert, stay calm, and never overreact. A single mistake could have destroyed years of fragile trust. He had learned early that discipline mattered more than strength. The alien environments were unfamiliar, sometimes beautiful, sometimes unsettling, but always dangerous in ways training could not fully prepare him for. Gravity shifted from place to place. Light behaved differently. Sounds carried in odd ways. Still, his job was simple. Stand still, observe, act only when absolutely necessary. Months passed like that. Time lost its shape. Meals came at fixed intervals. Sleep was shallow. Messages from home were delayed and filtered, stripped of emotion to keep minds steady. He followed orders because that was what he had trained his whole life to do. Not because he believed the mission would change history, but because someone had to hold the line while others talked. There were moments when tension thickened the air. A misunderstood movement. A translated phrase that came out wrong. A sudden shift in posture from an alien delegate that could have meant threat or respect, depending on the culture. Each time, his hand hovered near his gear, and each time he forced it to stay still. Restraint became his greatest skill. When the mission finally ended, there was no celebration. The talks concluded. Agreements were signed. The alien delegations returned to their worlds. His unit was thanked in a formal statement and told to prepare for extraction. That was it. No speeches. No medals handed out in front of cameras. Just orders to pack up and leave. Back on Earth, the familiar felt strange. The sky looked too open. The air felt heavy. People moved too fast and spoke too loudly. He passed through medical checks, psychological evaluations, and endless paperwork. Every answer he gave was short and careful. He had learned that saying too much invited questions he did not want to answer. The nights were the worst. Sleep came in pieces. He would wake suddenly, heart racing, listening for alarms that were no longer there. His body still expected danger, even when the room was safe. He sat on the edge of the bed more than once, staring at his hands, wondering when they would stop shaking. He was not angry. That surprised him. Many soldiers returned bitter or restless. He felt mostly empty. The mission had given him purpose, and now that purpose was gone. Friends asked if he was glad to be back. He said yes, because that was the expected answer. Inside, he was not sure what glad was supposed to feel like. Days later, he received a summons. It was not marked urgent, but the tone was formal enough to catch his attention. He was told to report to a secured government facility. No explanation was given. He assumed it was another debrief, maybe related to the diplomatic mission. Those talks had been classified at a level that followed participants long after completion. The facility was quiet, clean and cold in the way official places often were. He was escorted through corridors where sound seemed to disappear. No windows, no signs, just doors that opened only when authorized. He noticed how his training returned without effort. Back straight, eyes forward, steps measured. He was led into a small room, not a hall or office, but something closer to a private meeting space. A table, a few chairs. a screen on the wall that remained dark. The people who entered after him were not in uniform. They wore neutral clothing, chosen to reveal nothing. Their expressions were calm, professional, and distant. They thanked him for his service. The words sounded rehearsed, but not false. They spoke about the importance of restraint during the mission, about how several critical moments had passed without incident, because soldiers like him had followed protocol instead of instinct. He listened without reacting. Praise made him uncomfortable. It always had. Then they said something unexpected. They told him that the allied species involved in the talks had requested a special form of recognition. According to their culture, trust was not shown with words or documents. It was shown through personal bonds, through shared responsibility. At first, he thought he misunderstood. Even after clarification, his mind resisted the idea. He was not being promoted. He was not being assigned a new role. He was being offered something that did not fit into any military category he knew. They explained carefully. The species in question was small in physical size, far smaller than humans, but advanced in knowledge and social structure. One of their own had volunteered to act as a cultural bridge. She was to live under human protection, not as a captive or possession, but as a symbol of trust between civilizations. The word reward was mentioned, but it did not sit well with him. He felt his chest tighten. The idea of being given a living being, no matter the explanation, went against everything he believed. He spoke for the first time since entering the room. His voice was steady, but firm. He said he did not ask for this. He said he did not feel comfortable being part of something that sounded so personal and permanent. He asked whether the individual involved truly had a choice. The officials did not seem surprised. They said his reaction was expected. They explained that consent had been central to the decision. The alien woman had volunteered after studying human behavior and military ethics. She understood the risks. She understood the imbalance. She still chose to participate. That did not make it easier. He thought of all the times he had stood guard, weapon lowered, trusting that calm would hold. Now he was being asked to trust in a different way, one that had nothing to do with orders or rules of engagement. They told him he did not have to decide immediately. There would be evaluations, discussions, time to learn. He would not meet her yet. This part of the process was about him, about whether he could handle the responsibility without viewing it as ownership or privilege. When the meeting ended, he left the facility with more weight on his shoulders than he had carried during the mission itself. Outside, the world continued as normal. Cars passed. People talked into phones. Somewhere, a street vendor laughed. None of them knew what had just been placed in front of him. He walked for a long time before heading home. He tried to sort his thoughts, but they tangled instead. He was a soldier. He followed orders. But this was not an order. This was a choice, and choices were harder. That night, sleep did not come at all. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about duty, about consent, about how easily words like reward could hide complicated truths. He wondered whether peace always demanded something personal from those who stood closest to it. By morning, one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it was not a gift. It was a test. The days after the meeting moved slowly, as if time itself was unsure how to behave around him. He went through normal routines, morning checks, physical training, paperwork that never seemed to end. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, his thoughts stayed busy, circling the same questions again and again. He kept thinking about the word reward. It followed him everywhere. During meals, during training, during the quiet moments before sleep. The word felt wrong, like it had been placed there by mistake, and no one wanted to admit it. He had earned recognition for discipline and restraint, yet the recognition itself felt heavier than punishment. A few days later, another message arrived. This time it was clearer. He was invited, not ordered, to attend an orientation session. The message made it clear that refusal was allowed. That detail mattered more to him than they probably realized. The facility was different from the first one. Still secure, but less cold. There were windows this time, thick and reinforced, but they let light in. The atmosphere felt more like a research center than a military base. People moved calmly, speaking in low voices, carrying tablets instead of weapons. He was greeted by a small group of specialists, cultural experts, behavioral observers, diplomatic advisors. None of them treated him like a hero. They treated him like a human being facing something unfamiliar. That helped more than praise ever could. They explained the situation again, slowly and carefully. The miniature alien woman was part of a species that valued close observation and shared living as the highest form of trust. In their history, wars had started when such bonds were broken. Peace had lasted longest when they were honored. He listened without interrupting. He asked practical questions. Where would she live? How communication would work? What rights she would have? What rights he would not have? Every answer mattered. They showed him recorded messages translated into simple language. The alien woman spoke calmly, her tone steady and thoughtful. She did not speak of destiny or emotion. She spoke of choice, duty, and curiosity. She explained that she wanted to understand humans not through screens or reports, but through everyday life. He noticed how careful the translations were. No dramatic words. No pressure. No praise directed at him. Just statements of intent. That made him trust the process more than any official promise. Still, doubt remained. He had spent his career avoiding mistakes because mistakes cost lives. This felt like a situation where mistakes would cost something less visible, but just as important. Dignity, trust, moral ground. He asked what would happen if he said no. The answer came quickly. Another volunteer would be considered. The alliance would continue. No punishment. No consequences to his career. The only loss would be an opportunity, not an obligation. That answer surprised him. He had expected pressure hidden behind polite language. Instead, there was none. That made the choice feel even heavier. When no one forces your hand, you are left alone with your values. After the session, he was allowed to walk through a secured observation area. Behind transparent barriers, he saw environments built for different species. Some rooms were tall and narrow, others wide and low. One section was designed for being small in size, with gentle lighting and soft surfaces. He stopped there, watching from a distance. He did not see her. That was intentional. The specialists wanted the first meeting, if it happened, to be mutual and enforced. Still, the space itself made everything real. This was no longer a concept or a file. It was preparation for shared space. He left the facility with his head full and his heart unsettled. He tried to imagine explaining this to anyone outside the classified circle. There were no words that would not sound strange or wrong. He realized how isolated this path already was. That night, he called an old service contact, someone who understood military life without needing details. He did not explain the situation. He simply said he had been offered something that felt undeserved and uncomfortable. The response was quiet but honest. Sometimes the hardest missions are the ones where no one tells you what the right answer looks like. Sleep came in fragments again. Dreams mixed memories of watch duty with unfamiliar shapes and voices. He woke before dawn, not afraid, just alert. The way he always woke during deployments. The next morning, he requested another meeting. This time, He wanted to talk directly to the ethics panel. He wanted to know what protections existed for her, not for him. The question changed the tone of the room. The specialists exchanged glances, not annoyed, but relieved. They explained the safeguards. Independent oversight. Legal status recognized by both governments. The ability for her to leave at any time. Clear limits on authority and responsibility. They emphasized that he would be expected to treat her as an equal partner in daily decisions, not as someone under command. He asked if anyone had refused before. The answer was yes, more than once. Those refusals had been respected. Trust between species was not built on a single individual. It was built on honesty. That answer stayed with him. The choice was not about proving loyalty. It was about being honest about what he could handle. Later that day, he was given something unexpected. A personal log from the alien woman, translated but otherwise unchanged. She spoke about her preparation, about studying human history, about learning why soldiers were trained to follow orders even when unsure. She spoke about fear, not of humans, but of misunderstanding them. She said she did not expect kindness automatically. She expected effort. That line stayed with him longer than anything else. He began to see the situation differently. This was not about him being given someone. It was about two individuals being asked to represent their worlds through daily behavior. That did not remove the weight, but it reshaped it. Over the next week, he was allowed to observe more material. Cultural habits, social expectations, boundaries that mattered deeply to her people. He noticed how often respect was shown through patience rather than action. How silence could mean listening, not absence. He compared that to his own training. Stand still, observe, act only when necessary. The similarities unsettled him. Still, doubt returned at unexpected moments. While eating alone, while watching people laugh freely in public spaces, he wondered what kind of life this choice would allow. He wondered what it would take away. On the final day of orientation, he was asked one last question. Not whether he accepted, but whether he understood what refusal would mean to him personally. Not politically, not diplomatically. Personally. He answered honestly. He said refusal would be easier. Acceptance would stay with him forever. No one reacted. No one nodded or smiled. The room stayed neutral. That silence gave him space to think. He asked for one more thing. If he chose to proceed, he wanted the first meeting to be private, without observers. Just two individuals, both allowed to walk away. The request was granted. When he left the facility that day, he did not feel proud or afraid. He felt something quieter, readiness, the same feeling he had before difficult missions. Not certainty, just willingness to face whatever came next without pretending it was simple. That evening, he sat alone and wrote down his thoughts, something he had not done since training days. He wrote about responsibility, about consent, about how peace often asks for things that cannot be measured or displayed. By the time he put the pen down, he had not made a final decision. But he knew one thing clearly. If he went forward, it would not be because he was rewarded. It would be because he chose to carry the weight. The first meeting did not happen the way movies would show it. There was no dramatic reveal, no bright lights, no heavy music in the background. It happened in a small, quiet room designed to feel neutral to both of them. Soft light, smooth walls, no symbols of rank or authority anywhere. He arrived early, as he always did. Waiting had become a habit. It helped him stay calm. He stood near the wall at first, then sat down when he realized standing might feel intimidating. He reminded himself again that this was not an inspection or a mission briefing. This was two people meeting for the first time. When the door opened, she entered slowly, accompanied only by a translator device resting near her. She was smaller than he had imagined, but not fragile in the way he feared. Her movements were careful, not weak. Alert, not afraid. She looked around the room first, then at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He was the first to break the silence, keeping his voice low and steady. He said he was glad she chose to meet. Not glad in a proud way. Glad in a respectful one. The translator repeated his words in a tone that matched his intent. She listened closely. When she replied, her voice was light but clear. She thanked him for agreeing to talk, instead of deciding from a distance. That simple sentence eased some of the tension in his chest. They spent the first minutes talking about nothing important. The room, the light, the temperature. Small details that helped both of them adjust. He noticed how she paid attention to his posture and tone, not just his words. She noticed how he waited for the translator to finish before responding, never cutting in. He told her something that surprised even him. He said he did not see her as a symbol or a task. He said he was still unsure about everything, but he wanted honesty more than comfort. Saying it out loud made it real. She responded without hesitation. She said she did not want comfort either. She wanted clarity. She explained that in her culture, shared living was not about closeness or ownership. It was about observation and learning. About seeing how another being lived when no one was watching. That idea stayed with him. No one watching. That was where truth usually appeared. They talk about boundaries next. Not as rules written on paper, but as expectations spoken clearly. She explained what made her uncomfortable. Sudden movements. Loud tones meant as commands. Being lifted or touched without warning. He listened carefully and repeated each point to show he understood. When it was his turn, he surprised himself again. He admitted he needed routine. He needed clear communication. He needed the freedom to step away when overwhelmed. Saying these things felt strange. Soldiers were trained to endure, not to ask. She accepted his boundaries without question. That simple respect made something shift inside him. The meeting ended without a decision. That was intentional. They both agreed that understanding could not be rushed. As she left, she paused and looked back at him. She said she appreciated that he did not try to impress her. He did not know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded. Over the next few weeks, they began a slow process of shared time. Always supervised at first, but with increasing distance from observers. They spent hours in shared spaces doing ordinary things. Reading, listening to recordings from their worlds. Sitting quietly without talking. He learned that silence did not make her uncomfortable. It made her attentive. She learned that when he grew quiet, it usually meant he was thinking, not withdrawing. These small understandings mattered more than any formal agreement. They communicated through the translator, but also through gestures and patterns. She noticed that he always checked doors twice. He noticed that she preferred sitting near walls rather than open spaces. Neither asked why. Some habits did not need explanations. One day, during a shared meal adapted for both of them, she asked him why he chose restraint during the mission instead of force. The question was direct, not accusatory. He took his time answering. He said he had seen what happened when fear decided actions. He said force ended conversations, while patience allowed them to continue. He admitted that sometimes restraint felt like weakness, especially when others expected strength. She listened carefully. Then she said that in her culture, restraint was considered the highest form of strength, not because it avoided conflict, but because it showed confidence in understanding. That was the first time he felt truly seen. As days passed, trust grew in quiet ways. She learned how his days were structured. Morning exercise, planning, maintenance of equipment, even when it was no longer needed. Routine was how he kept himself grounded. that he learned about her preparation. Years of study, physical training adapted to her size, mental exercises designed to handle isolation. She was not chosen because she was small. She was chosen because she was steady. That realization removed the last trace of guilt he had been carrying. She was not being protected because she was weak. She was being trusted because she was capable. There were moments of tension, misunderstood phrases, differences in humor. Once, a translated sentence came out harsher than intended, and he saw her posture shift slightly. He stopped immediately, apologized, and rephrased his words more carefully. The moment passed, but the lesson stayed. They learned that repair mattered as much as respect. As supervision decreased, responsibility increased. He was given access to tools and resources to support shared living. He made sure she was involved in every decision. Where things were placed, how the space was arranged, what times were quiet. He never assumed. He always asked. She, in turn, began asking about him, about Earth, about why humans valued individual choice so strongly, about why soldiers were honored even when they did not want attention. He answered honestly, even when the answers were uncomfortable. He admitted that humans often confused worth with action, that doing something visible mattered more than doing something right. She found that idea troubling but fascinating. One evening, after a long day of shared tasks, they sat quietly near a window. The city lights outside were distant and blurred. She asked him a question that felt heavier than the rest. She asked if he regretted accepting. He did not answer right away. He thought about the weight, the isolation, the attention that would come later. Then he thought about the way their conversations had changed him already. He said he did not regret it. He said he was still afraid of doing something wrong, but he no longer felt trapped. He felt responsible in a way that made sense. She nodded and said responsibility was the point. From that moment on, the arrangement stopped feeling like an agreement written by others. It started feeling like a shared path shaped by daily choices. Not dramatic ones, small ones, honest ones. They were still watched, still evaluated, still discussed in rooms they never entered. But inside their shared space, something quiet and real was forming. Not ownership, not reward. Trust built one ordinary moment at a time. The first sign of trouble did not come from officials or commands. It came from silence breaking in the wrong places. At first, small changes appeared around him. Extra security checks, longer pauses before doors opened, conversations that stopped when he entered a room. No one said anything directly, but the air felt different, heavier than before. Then one morning, while moving through a public corridor inside the facility, he noticed screens playing muted news feeds. He did not need sound to understand what was happening. Words like alliance, ethics, and cultural boundaries scrolled across the bottom. His chest tightened. The arrangement was no longer contained. Information had leaked. It was not classified details, but enough to spark curiosity and fear. A human soldier, a miniature alien woman, shared living, trust agreement. The story spread quickly, stripped of context and filled with assumption. People who had never stood guard during first contact now had strong opinions about what it meant. He was called in for a briefing that afternoon. This time, the room was larger. More people, more screens, more tension. Officials explained that public response was divided. Some praised the arrangement as progress. Others called it disturbing or unfair. Social platforms were full of arguments, none of them balanced. He listened quietly, hands resting on his knees. He had faced pressure before. This was different. Before, danger came from outside. Now it came from words. They told him he was becoming a symbol, not by choice, but by position. People were projecting their fears and hopes onto him. On to her. The arrangement was being discussed without either of them present. His first thought was not about himself. It was about her. When he returned to their shared space, he found her sitting near the window, the translator active beside her. She had already seen the news. Her posture was calm, but her attention was sharp. She asked him directly, if humans often argued, loudly before understanding quietly. He almost smiled. Almost. He answered honestly. He said humans feared what challenged their ideas of control. He said unfamiliar situations made people speak before they listened. He apologized, though he was not sure for what exactly. She told him there was no need to apologize yet. She said attention was expected. What mattered was how they responded to it. The next days tested that idea. Requests came in. Interviews, statements, appearances, all declined at first. Officials wanted to protect the process. That only made speculation worse. Silence became fuel. Outside the facility, people protested both for and against the arrangement. Signs carried words like progress and exploitation. Neither side truly understood the reality inside the shared space. He watched footage later, feeling strange seeing himself reduced to a label. Inside, pressure grew quieter but sharper. He was advised to keep interactions minimal, to limit visibility, to follow stricter protocols again. The arrangement that had been built on trust was slowly being wrapped in caution tape. One evening, he noticed her watching him more closely than usual. Finally, she asked if he regretted the attention. Not the decision. The attention. He thought carefully before answering. He said he did not regret it, but he hated that others were speaking for them. He hated that she was being discussed as an idea instead of a person. She nodded. Then she said something that surprised him. She said she wanted to speak. Not through filtered statements, not through advisors. She wanted her voice heard directly. He felt fear rise immediately. Not for himself, but for her. Public spaces could be cruel. Words could wound without touching. He explained the risks, misinterpretation, harsh reactions. The way clips could be cut and reshaped. She listened patiently. Then she reminded him that she had chosen this path, knowing scrutiny would come. Silence, she said, could also be misinterpreted. The request went through channels quickly. There was resistance, but also relief. A direct voice might calm the noise, or it might make it louder. No one could be sure. The address was short and controlled. She spoke through translation, seated calmly, not elevated, not framed as something delicate or dramatic. Just present. She explained her choice in simple terms. She said she was not given. She volunteered. She said she was not owned. She was responsible for her own decisions. She explained her culture without comparing it to human values or judging them. Most importantly, she spoke about trust. Not as a gift, but as a shared effort. She said trust required patience from both sides. She said misunderstanding was natural, but fear did not have to be. When it ended, the room stayed silent for a long moment. The reaction afterward was not instant change, but something shifted. The tone softened in some places, hardened in others. That was expected. But now, the discussion included her as a speaker, not a subject. For him, the cost became personal in new ways. He received messages from former peers, some supportive, some confused, some openly hostile. He read them all, but replied to none. He had learned that not every voice deserved an answer. Inside the facility, his role changed again. He was asked to attend ethics reviews, not as a symbol, but as a participant. He spoke honestly about the pressure, about how being watched changed behavior, about how trust could not survive if treated like a performance. There were moments when he felt close to breaking. When exhaustion returned, heavier than during deployment, when sleep became shallow again. He did not hide those moments from her. One night, unable to rest, he sat quietly while she worked on her own tasks. After a while, she asked him to explain why humans struggled so much with being judged. He told her that humans often tied identity to approval. Being seen the wrong way felt like being erased. He admitted that even soldiers, trained to endure, felt the weight of public opinion. She considered that, then said something simple. She said being observed did not change who she was. It only revealed it. That stayed with him. As weeks passed, new rules were proposed. New frameworks. Some helpful, some restrictive. Each one chipped away at the quiet space they had built. He pushed back where he could, not with anger, but with reason. He argued that overprotection could become control. That fear of criticism should not override respect for consent. Sometimes he won. Sometimes he did not. Through it all, she remained steady. Not silent, but measured. She reminded him when to rest, when to step back, when to stop fighting battles that were not his alone. One day, after a particularly difficult review, he returned feeling hollow. He sat down without speaking. She did not ask questions right away. She waited. When he finally spoke, he admitted he was tired of being careful in public while being honest in private. She replied that public honesty was slow, but private honesty was where strength formed. She said they were doing the hardest part first. Gradually, he realized something. The scrutiny was not just a challenge. It was a mirror. It revealed weaknesses in systems, in assumptions, in how quickly people judged what they did not understand. He also realized he was changing. He was less reactive, more deliberate. The soldier who once measured threats now measured words and impact. The arrangement had started as a diplomatic experiment. It had become something more difficult and more human. It demanded patience not just from them, but from everyone watching. One evening, standing by the window again, city lights glowing softly, he asked her if she ever wished she had chosen someone else. Someone less visible, less complicated. She answered without hesitation. She said complexity was not a flaw. It was proof that the situation mattered. That night, for the first time since the attention began, he slept deeply. Not because the pressure was gone, but because he finally understood something. The world would keep watching. People would keep talking. But what mattered most was how they continued to choose respect over fear, every single day, even when it was hardest. The noise did not disappear, but it slowly changed shape. What once felt like sharp pressure turned into a constant background presence, something they learned to live with rather than fight against every day. After months of reviews, debates, and adjustments, a final decision came from the highest levels. The arrangement would no longer be described as a reward. The word was officially removed from all documents. It was now defined as a voluntary cultural exchange protected by law, guided by consent, and monitored with clear limits. When he read the update, he felt something loosen inside his chest. Not relief exactly, but alignment. The words finally matched the reality he had been living. He was asked if he wished to continue under the new framework. The question was no longer formal. It was personal. There was no pressure attached, no hidden expectations. Just a clear choice. He did not answer immediately. That evening, he and she sat together in the shared space, the lights low, the city quiet outside. He told her about the update. He told her that for the first time, the situation felt honest in writing, not just in action. She listened, then asked him what he wanted. The question caught him off guard. So much of his life had been shaped by duty that personal want often came second. He thought carefully before speaking. He said he wanted to continue, but only if she did. He said he wanted the arrangement to remain what they had built, not what others imagined. He said he did not want to be responsible for her life, but responsible with her trust. She answered calmly. She said she had already chosen, not because of policy changes or public opinion, but because of daily behavior. She said trust was formed through consistency, not declarations. The next weeks were quieter, not because attention vanished, but because the structure around them grew clearer. Boundaries were respected more often. Oversight became less intrusive. Their shared space felt like a place again, not a display. He returned to active service in a limited role. Not frontline deployment, but advisory and training work. His experience with restraint, communication, and cross-cultural tension became valuable in ways he had not expected. Some questioned why he stayed, why he did not ask to be reassigned completely. He never gave a dramatic answer. He simply said this was where he was useful. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with quiet preparation. He exercised. She worked through her own studies and reports. They shared meals adapted for both of them. Conversations flowed naturally, sometimes deep, sometimes light, sometimes absent altogether. They learned each other's signals. When silence meant thinking, when silence meant fatigue, when words were needed and when they were not. One afternoon, she asked him what he thought the word reward meant now. He thought for a long time before answering. He said reward used to mean recognition for effort. Then it came to mean something uncomfortable, something given without understanding. Now, he said, the word felt empty. She asked what felt full instead. He said trust, responsibility, choice. Over time, public interest faded into something steadier. Not headlines, but academic discussions. Training material. Quiet references in policy debates. Their story was no longer shocking. It was studied. That did not mean it was easy. There were days when he felt tired beyond reason. Days when old instincts returned, urging him to withdraw, to simplify, to avoid complexity. On those days, she reminded him to rest, not retreat. There were days when she felt the weight of representation, when she worried that a single mistake might reflect on her entire species. On those days, he reminded her that perfection was not the goal. Honesty was. They supported each other not through grand gestures, but through presence. Being there, paying attention, adjusting when needed. One evening, as they watched the sky darken beyond the window, he spoke about the future. Not plans, but uncertainty. He admitted he did not know where his path would lead. Military life had always been structured. This was not. She said uncertainty was not a weakness. It was proof that life was still being shaped. She said her people believed certainty belonged to the past, not the future. He found comfort in that. Eventually, he was invited to speak at a closed training session for new peacekeeping units. He stood in front of a small group, not in uniform, no symbols on the wall behind him. He spoke plainly. He talked about restraint, about listening longer than felt comfortable, about how trust could be damaged by impatience more than hostility. He did not mention her directly. He did not need to. Afterward, one trainee asked what the hardest part of his experience had been. He answered without hesitation. He said learning to let go of the idea that doing the right thing would always feel right. Sometimes it felt heavy. Sometimes it felt lonely. That did not mean it was wrong. When he returned home that day, she asked how it went. He told her simply that he thought he had helped. She smiled, a small expression that carried more meaning than words. As time passed, the arrangement stopped being referred to as an arrangement at all. It became daily life, shared responsibility, mutual respect. The world still watched in quiet ways. Reports were written. Data was gathered. Lessons were extracted. But the focus had shifted. not to them as individuals, but to what their experience revealed about cooperation without control. One night, long after the city had gone quiet, he sat alone, reflecting on the path that brought him here. He thought about the soldier he used to be, focused, guarded, defined by orders. He realized he had not lost that part of himself. It had simply grown. He still valued discipline, still believed in service. But now he understood that the hardest form of duty was choosing care when no one demanded it. Before sleeping, he wrote in his personal journal again. He wrote about how peace was not a moment, but a practice. About how true recognition did not come from ceremonies, but from living up to trust every day. In the morning, as light filled the room, she asked him a simple question. She asked if he felt rewarded. He considered the question carefully. Then he answered honestly. He said he did not feel rewarded. He felt entrusted. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough.